but I just wanted to talk a little bit about it today, a little bit about kind of my process with it and some of the ideas that I was trying to play around with the short story. So I'm gonna read it. I apologize. I have a very bad reading voice, but uh, we're just we're just gonna go for it. So at night, the mist on the sea felt like gunpowder smoke on her face. It was like a crow's nest, her widow walk atop the marble white mansion. The mansion was what her mother might have called a disgrace, and what her father would have deemed needing some work, but she loved it. It was her home, and Richard's too. But he was gone now, far away, or maybe not so far. The pain that he was not here now was acute in her waist and in her heart. The sea churned and crashed onto the shore, restless as her heart. Today she had finished putting up new wallpaper in the nursery. The room was now a baby blue. It was unoccupied, but they had every intention of filling the nursery when Richard made it home. She was her father's daughter, and so she was going to make sure the house was respectable. Tomorrow she might see him returning, but while she waited, she would see about fixing the peeling paint on the outside of the house. Precisely the part that her mother despised. Mother would have liked the home more if the outside was more appealing. Damn whatever was inside. She glanced out at the water. The setting sun rippled on the sea, like the blast of the sparrow's cannon fire ripping across the face of the water. The sun seemed so far away, but she still felt it. It still touched her skin. Richard was further away than that. He was out of eyesight and earshot, out of reach. 3 months had passed since he had left her with only a kiss. It's all right to cry, he told her, but even his eyes were glassy with tears. He hadn't looked back as the sparrow left harbor, maybe because it was too hard, or maybe because he didn't want her to see. The rain was coming down now, wet and cold, but she stood on her walk, looking out for Richard. Heavens knew he was standing atop the deck of the Sparrow, soaking in his uniform. Today she hadn't been able to see to the paint. The pain in her abdomen was far too acute. She wondered if a musket ball would hurt this bad. She couldn't believe it would. Maybe one of those new mini balls her husband had told her about. The French had invented it. It was made of soft lead, not the hard metal that musket balls used to be made of. The soft lead made it so the round would shatter if it struck bone, tearing apart flesh. That is how she felt, as if she was being torn apart inside. He felt it too. He was bleeding too. She never doubted that he would come back to her. They had waited years apart to be wed. Even if she had to wait years, she would rest in his arms once again. So, yeah, there were a few things I was trying to play with, a few ideas I was trying to play with the short story. And I feel like the end came off a little clunky. I didn't really like it that much, but I wanted to keep it under 500 words. And this is, I think, 498 words. So I wanted to keep it very brief. And I think the ending gets after what I wanted it to get after. Like, I do think Richard will come home. I do think they will be united. I don't think he's going to die. But I don't know. I just felt like it was kind of a bit of a clunky ending. The idea that I was trying to get after with this story was that soulmates, people that are intended to be wed, intended to be together their entire life, are have similar experiences across space and time. So that's why, something that the main character here, who's never named, wouldn't experience would be the feeling of gunpowder smoke on her face, or being in a crow's nest. But those are things that I use to explain her experience because those are similar to what Richard would be experiencing. You know, he would be very familiar with those things because he's a sailor. And I don't know, I would love some feedback. I don't know if I got that across well. I did my best, but I didn't want to make it obvious. I feel like there are a lot of readers or writers on Substack who I love their work, but they have an idea. And being an author, you want to be recognized for the ideas that you're trying to share, and and just, you know, how extraordinarily genius you are. And so you want to tell people what everything means, because then maybe they'll understand what you're trying to do. And so I don't know if I was too obvious. I would love to know, because I would like this to kind of be something where people could come to it and experience, kind of have it unravel in their own experience, so that they can bring things that they see to the work, rather than the author coming out and saying, this is all what it means and this is how you need to understand it. I think when the author does that, they're writing more of an essay, and they're not really sharing a story with the world. Once you start to share a story, or once you release it to people, it's not yours anymore. It's for everyone else at that point. And a well-written story, I think, should not be explained so much that it can't be anything more than what the author intends. I think people should be able to bring a fresh perspective to it when they experience it. And if you make it obvious what you're trying to do, if you just come out and be like, this is the answer, then people don't have that freedom to come and bring their own experience to the story. So if I made it too obvious, I apologize. If I didn't make it obvious enough, I apologize. But we're just kind of it's practice, you know. Practice makes perfect. So the funny thing about this too, and about my process, is that when I have an idea, I think it's so easy to try to be like, this is going to become my trilogy. This is going to be my new great work. And this is going to be my Brothers Karamazov, and it's going to be this giant novel. But I think that for me, when I get an idea, I just kind of try to write as much of it as I can. And like what's going on with this work is that if there's more to be said, the work will just kind of demand that you write more of it. And I think that's very exciting, that the idea is still kind of unresolved. So more thoughts and more ideas about what should be said regarding the subject come to mind and kind of force themselves into your process. And that's kind of what's happening with this. So some other ideas are being played with. I'll probably release kind of like an updated version. But I'm very, very proud of this. I think this is the best thing I've released on Substack so far. At least it's, for me, what's from my perspective, that's very, very, you know, biased, because this is similar to my experience of being far away from my wife when we were, you know, dating. To me, this really kind of speaks to me more than some of my other works. But I have heard people say that this is not my best. So to each their own. Something else I was trying to kind of grapple with. This is set in like the Napoleonic period, the Napoleonic era. And I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to just come out and say, like, this is the year. I wanted to sprinkle in enough hints and details that the audience can discover that for themselves. But I think a lot of stories about like prowess in combat forget about the people left at home. I love a good war story, you know, like Gladiator, for example. Half of the movie is just Russell Crowe kicking butt, which is awesome, and I'm all there for it. And you do get a lot of like, oh, he's thinking about his family, they're back home alone without him, and he's excited to get back to them. But you don't usually often get the perspective of the people left behind. And I wanted to write a story that did a little bit of that. You know, it must be terribly, terribly difficult for your son or your husband or your loved one to go off to war, and that may be the last time you see them when they leave. And they may die and you have nothing to, you couldn't even say goodbye again. So that must be incredibly difficult. And I don't know why we don't have more stories written about that. So that's kind of another thing that I was trying to do with this. But yeah, that's about it. Honestly, it's small, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It might become a lot bigger. It might become kind of a bit of a novella, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. No, this is a bit short and sweet, but it's very short, so very short story. But yeah, thank you all for joining me. I will be posting this as a video later, so if any of you missed any parts of it, you can always come back to it. But thank you all so much for joining me, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear any feedback any of you may have, and thank you all so much for joining me. Peace and prosperity.